So I wanted to start by sharing a personal story with you. A little while ago, and I'm not being honest, many years ago, when I was in my final year of college, I began that emotional journey of trying to determine what that next step was going to be post-graduation. What company was I going to work for? What career path was I going to take? So I began to do that research that you do when you're in college, and I identified 3 companies that made my short list of organizations. And I decided I would bounce it off with my older brother and my father, both of whom were very successful in business, and I thought they would be great individuals to talk to about my list. So we met and we talked about the first and second company on that list, and they were excited and agreed. But when we talked about the third company, the room shifted significantly. And I was surprised because the third company on my list was actually an organization that both my father and brother had worked for. My brother worked with the organization for about 5 years. He went in through their management and training program. The first thing my brother said to me was, absolutely not. He said for him, it was one of the most toxic environments he had ever worked in. He did not feel like he was heard. He did not feel like he was included. He felt like as an African-American man that he was even marginalized. And it was a bad experience for him. This is real world, honest conversation talk. My father had been with the organization for 40 plus years. He had worked his way up through the trenches. I mean, so for me, I thought his story had to be different. Before my father retired from that company, he retired as a vice president of operations. He was a senior executive with the organization. So I thought for sure my father would have a different story. But to my surprise and my shock, my father's stories were very similar. Even worse, my father was charged with helping to establish policies within that organization, and he was met with such anger and hostility in reference to some of the new things that he was trying to put in place as it related to diversity and inclusion. So at the end of the conversation, they told me, cross that off the list. Now the ladies up here who know me know that I don't like the word no, and I don't like the word can't. So it stayed on my list, and you can imagine where I'm going. When I graduated from college, where did I go work? I went to work for the organization my father and brother said not to work for. Because I felt like I had something to prove, not just to them, but to myself. And I really, in my young mind, I thought, it can't possibly be that way anymore. I mean, the world is changing. People are embracing diversity and inclusion. So it can't possibly still be like that. I'm going to show them. And I would love to sit here and tell you that there was a happily ever after, that I went on board and I saw people that looked like Sheila. But the reality was, in a group of 20 that entered this management and training program, I was the only African American and I was the only female. My father shared with me that as it related to promotions within the organization, and again, I want to remind you, it was 40 plus years that he worked with them. He only knew of 3 women that had made it past middle management. Unfortunately, the culture in that organization hadn't changed some 20 years later. It still was really just living in the old culture. This is how we've always done business, and really had no desire to change. I can tell you story after story. One specifically resonates with me to this day, where I had a supervisor actually come to me and say, let's be clear, you're here because you fill a quota. You check off 2 boxes. The best thing you can do is keep your head down, your mouth shut, and work hard. Now again, those of you who know me, and you can tell by the jewelry, I'm not going to keep my mouth shut, and I'm not going to be quiet and silent. I'm going to contribute, I'm going to work hard, and I want to get what I deserve in that marketplace, and that is an opportunity to have a seat at the table. Next slide. So I think we've all seen the studies, we've all seen the reports about really the benefits of having a diverse and inclusive workforce. 2 times as likely to meet and exceed financial targets. Organizations that have an inclusive culture are 3 times as likely to be high performing, 6 times more likely to be more innovative and agile, 8 times more likely to achieve better business outcomes. We've all seen it. Next slide. This slide really just talks to you about how those organizations that are doing this well, how they feel. And they feel as though 57% of them say team collaboration is up. They have 19% more retention. They feel as though they're 45% more likely to improve their market share. And they feel as though they have a 70% chance of having more success in new markets. I think it's safe to say that right now, we are definitely in a diversity and inclusion revolution. Things have significantly changed and shifted. But let's talk about what that really looks like. There are 8 truths I just want to share with you very quickly about diversity and inclusion programs. Number 1, diversity of thinking is indeed the new frontier. All right, if you're not thinking diversity and inclusion, you're behind the 8 ball. Diversity without inclusion is not enough. Way back when they realized they needed to have a diverse workforce, what would happen is they would go to human resources and say, here's a piece of paper, we need to increase the number of women, we need to increase the number of Hispanics, we need to increase the number of African Americans. And if they checked off those boxes, they thought that was enough. What we have learned is that the program has to include diversity and an inclusion program. Inclusive leaders cast a long shadow. We've all heard it. It stinks from the top. But you can tell an organization where diversity and inclusion is important to the leadership because it trickles down to middle management. And middle management, we have to remember, they are the boots on the ground. They're the ones that are sitting in front of our customers. They're the ones that are driving that culture. So it's important that you get a buy-in from that organization as well. Rewire the system to rewire behavior. Tangible goals make ambitions real. Match the inside to the outside. If your customer has changed, we were talking earlier about the fact that when I first started working with NSWC, my customer looked differently. Now it's a younger generation of people. And so it's important that from the inside, my organization reflects the customers that we're sitting in front of. We can pretend all we want, but these unconscious bias exist. And people want to do business with people that they're comfortable with, people that they like. And last but not least, perform a culture of reset. If we want to change our culture, if we want to see something significantly increase in our business, we've got to change the same old thing that we've done. So let's talk a little bit about what a seat at the table really looks like. This is where you guys get to jump in and help. And I only have a little time, so I need to hear from you. So when you think about a successful diversity and inclusion program, what words come to mind? Give me some words. No words. Nothing comes to mind when you think about that.
Overdue.
I'm sorry?
Overdue.
Overdue. What else?
Vibrant.
Vibrant. What about an environment where everyone is celebrated? An environment where people feel like they are heard? An environment that creates unity within your teams. It becomes a natural, organic thing. An environment where people feel like they're respected, where they're partners in the process. The goal is for everyone to embrace the mission. That's the goal. An environment where people feel like people are listening to them, where they're valued. And diversity and inclusion is an honest program, if you do it the right way. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit really quickly about what companies can do. The first thing that I say to a company when I go in to help them with their program is this: I need you to be honest, all right? I don't need you to tell me how great it is and it works and life is great. I wouldn't be there if life was great. So be honest with yourself about what's working and what's not working so that you can make change. Get help from experts. The worst thing a company or organization can do is have their own team internally. That team is going to make sure that their jobs are secure. They're not going to be honest about the challenges and the issues within that program. So get help from outside. Get an objective group of individuals to come in and help you hone that program or establish a program that is going to work for your organization. Keep that dialogue going. It is not a one and done. You don't sit down and create a report And now you give someone that responsibility, and it's done. It's a living organism. As our lifestyle changes, as this world changes, as our pool of individuals that we can tap into changes, your program should change as well. Leadership has to walk the walk. That's a given. And the last thing I want to say is, it's no longer a melting pot. You know, back in the day, everyone had to wear the black suits and the blue blouse, et cetera, et cetera. I was never that girl, if you can't tell. I was never that person. But that was the mentality with these types of programs. It was, you just have to learn how to be like we all are. We now know that having a workforce that's mosaic is the answer. That each piece that that person brings is a value, where they come from, their experiences, how they approach things. That's how they add value to your workplace. The last thing I want to talk to you about is, what would I tell 20-year-old Sheila? I would tell her a lot, all right? But for those of you who are finding yourself out in the workplace right now, and you're walking in, and when you walk in, the only person you see who looks like you is in the mirror. Here's some things I want to share with you. The first thing is, find satisfaction in a job well done. If you're working waiting to be acknowledged, you may be waiting forever. You should be satisfied and performing well because you know this is what you need to do, and this is what makes you happy. You may never be invited out for beer. You may never be invited to the golf tournament. It's okay. Be satisfied with a job well done. The second thing, understand the value of your voice. I know April talked about it a little bit, but there's value in what you have to say. Don't put your head down. You finally have a seat at the table. Speak. Speak. It's not just about what you have to contribute. It's about changing mindsets. It's about changing bias. And it's about establishing a future for someone who can come behind you. Use your voice. The next thing I would say is build your network. I can't emphasize that enough. Build a network outside of your organization, within organizations like ASNE, Women in Defense. Doesn't matter. Build a network of individuals that you can tap into. It will help you now, and it will help you in your future. Find a champion. Now, it's great when your organization has a great mentorship program. If you're new to it, I recommend you get a mentor. If you don't have one internally, seek an external mentor or even a business coach. The value of that, I can't even express. And last but not least, it goes without saying, it really doesn't matter how you got a seat at the table. It really doesn't. Don't get wrapped up in that. You may have a seat at the table simply because you fill a quota. Each woman up here, each of the women up here can attest that we've been in that situation. As a matter of fact, we're on this panel because we fit a quota. Let's be candid, right? But it doesn't really matter how we got here. What matters is what we do when you have a seat at the table. Thank you.